Okay, welcome to my talk, Migrating from jQuery Core Journey to Vanilla.js. I'll talk about pretty much this, the journey for the core to move away from jQuery towards other technologies, what we built and what we had to go through to go where we are now. At first, a little bit about me. I'm Andreas Nedbal. I'm a senior front developer at Into Code. And I'm also a core merger for Typo 3 of the backend UX component. Speaking of job titles, I also got one from the community. I'm the mighty jQuery slayer. I got that one over the past year, migrating away a lot of jQuery. So I guess a lot of you already know jQuery, but in case you don't, let's talk a little bit of jQuery. What is jQuery? It's a DOM manipulation library released in 2006. It unified the APIs of a lot of different browser vendors with simpler methods, because back in the day, everyone thought it would be cool to implement the same thing with different methods, and jQuery added methods to unify this. As a little bit of a tidbit, by the way, in 2021, the share of the top 10 million websites that still use jQuery was 75%, so it's far from that. And speaking about that, it really isn't that. jQuery 4.0, the preview, released in 2024, like in February. So that was the next major version after 8 years. I think, yeah, jQuery 3 came out in 2016 or something, and they're still working on it. Actually, they also remove a lot of stuff from jQuery. They're making it simpler. They remove IAE stuff, I think. Okay, so I'll go about a lot of the refactoring things, like different steps, explain what we did for each, show some before and after code. So let's start with the generic stuff, $ or the jQuery function. And to get rid of that, the first step is understanding the code, because the $ can actually mean two different things if it's used as a selector. It can mean query selector or query selector all, because it's actually always selecting multitudes. So if we want to refactor, we could probably go to and just make everything query selector all. But if we just always select one element only, then for better understanding, we just use query selector. Then we have to go, since a lot of the methods are not matching the signature of regular vanilla JavaScript, and replace stuff like what is attr with get or set attribute, because attr is a shorthand for both setting and getting attributes in jQuery. So it's also two things. It's, once again, reading the code and understanding. It's like there's a lot of stuff that prevents us from automatically. I mean, if there were something like rector or fractor for JavaScript, would prevent us from automatically just replacing all the things. Another good thing is, like, we have a lot of code that clears out entire elements and adds new content. In jQuery, that was like emptying and then appending new content. In JavaScript, we thankfully have like one method that does it, or we can just replace children by now. Kind of automatically, though, what I did was using a lot of find and replace regular expressions. If you use PHP Storm and VS Code, then you know that you can use regular expressions in the search fields. And you can kind of use that to select, like, for example, here, the .data method, which is used to get data attributes, and then basically take what's inside it and just append it behind .dataset in vanilla JavaScript. Depending on what the attribute is named, you still have to make some adjustments, because dashes don't work in attribute names and stuff. But it is some help, at least. Same for add class and remove class, etc. That's like class list add and remove, whatnot. And as I said, afterwards, we need to do a lot of adjustments if we do these replacement things, because the DOM API compared to jQuery does not have method chaining. In jQuery, you can chain methods from one single $ starting point like endlessly, and you can't do that with JavaScript unless you would write your own wrapper around elements or the methods. So you basically need to also factor that in. As a little example here, we have a list of elements that get selected and things that get selected from inside elements, closes stuff. And this is pretty much like a little bit of wrapping because the lines are kind of long, but it pretty much turns into from just dollar stuff to query selector. Closest actually is the same in jQuery and JavaScript. And yeah, that's pretty much it. As another example here, we have the data stuff where we access eltern and parent and basically do the same thing, just now with stuff like dataset. Then we go on to the next thing. Still inside dollar, obviously. Now we go about on or event handling. And we mostly do like UI event handling, but the difference between jQuery event handling and vanilla event handling is quite there's quite a difference, especially considering global events that don't really exist in vanilla JavaScript. If you know the second argument in the on method, you can basically select any new element or like later inserted elements using a selector. That doesn't exist in regular JavaScript. So typo3 actually has an alternative to the on method with the regular event class. Here's a quick outline. That's not all of the methods, but that's the most important public methods. Of course, we have a constructor. We give it an event name, click, change, whatever, the callback method. And additionally, you can pass it event listener options. Those are from vanilla JavaScript. Then we have two methods that we use mostly. And these are replacements for other behavior from regular event handling or jQuery event handling. One is bind to, which binds the event handler to an element for the specific event that we defined in the constructor. That is basically add event listener. And then we have delegate to, which is a bit more interesting because we can, of course, say it originates from a specific element like before, but we can also pass it a selector. That is the second argument from on. And that basically matches the multi-argument on method. As an example, we have some jQuery event handling here. As soon as any input by the name unlock dependency ignore button changes, we execute some event. And to get the same thing in JavaScript, like in vanilla JavaScript, we have our regular event. That's also like on the chain, bind to the change event. And we have our listener callback method. And at the end, we delegate it to the same input selector as before. That basically gets us exactly the same behavior as the on the multi-argument on in jQuery. Next thing, we have Ajax. Mostly replaced by fetch, but we also have a custom request implementation that works for $Ajax called Ajax request. And it also provides a custom Ajax response class. You can basically initialize a request to some endpoint or location with a constructor again. Then you have, that by the way is not a valid syntax. That's just all the different methods that exist. We have direct methods for get, post, put, or delete requests. And then you can like request init is just request options that you can give to fetch requests as well. Then there's also the abort method. Using signals, you can abort requests if you need to. The response, obviously, like it gets automatically created by the request methods in AJAX request and is returned in a promise, and you can resolve it. It's quite straightforward in this case. As an example, we have a simple $AJAX call here. As we know it, we have a URL, a data type that we want, and then we do something on success. This is how the same thing looks in vanilla with our AJAX request class. We initialize it against or with the parameter of our URL that we request against. We say we want a GET request using the GET method, and then return the response, like the promise, and use the response object in it. A special thing about this is like previously, if we look back again, we had to specify the data type. The AJAX request and response methods automatically try to resolve the specific method, because if you used fetch requests before, you know you need to, before actually being able to use the data, unless you want to use it in text form, you need to either resolve another resolve another promise using the .html or .json method. Typo3 does that automatically. You can also specify it if you need a different response type, but usually it tries to infer the two most common types, which is JSON and HTML on its own. So that's why we can basically directly use inner HTML as an assignment here as well. Next topic, animations. The top ones that most people know, fade in and fade out. Okay, so what do we do about them? There's two solutions. One is CSS. Since the start, CSS has been like powerful enough. And the other solution is just removing them, because to be honest, we looked at them and most of them were probably added because it just kind of looks cool, I guess. Like they didn't really serve too much purpose. Instead of maybe delaying stuff, making it slower, like it probably looked cool to have like stuff slide up, slide down, but it's not really that practical. And it also has like stuff with like accessibility and stuff. So considering we also went more for the accessibility focus, we just said like, hey, for a lot of them, we just drop the animations. As one case here, very simple. Here's like fading and sliding, and what it pretty much ended up with, we just removed these specific elements now. That's just quicker as well. More rapid feedback to the user. Okay. Then we're coming to probably my favorite topic. You can see this abomination here, because in jQuery, you can make new elements using $ as well. You can just close the tag again that you opened, and it will create a new element inside this that you can directly use. And using append, you can, of course, add elements inside that. And so you can basically build HTML with jQuery quite comfortably. And while working on this over the last year, I kind of found a fitting name for this. You know JSX from other stuff like React Fame and things. I called this jQuery X. And you know what? Let's kill it with fire. Speaking of fire, that's our solution, lit elements. If you haven't heard of lit or lit elements, that's a simple wrapper library around web components. It provides a base class and a lot of utilities, decorators that ease and simplify the development of web components. It initially was part of the Polymer project, if that rings a bell to some people. That was like a kind of web framework stuff, part of Angular thing back in 2015-ish. And back in 2018, when Lit was developed, it kind of was part of lit at first, and now lit is actually the surviving component because Polymer is in maintenance and pretty much dead. So it's now also just recommended to use, like if you want to build custom web components, just use lit. You could also try to build them by hand, but it's kind of tough. Actually won't go through all of this. We already saw like the small example. This is just some code. Like, there's a lot of this code like this. Like it builds a lot of complex structures, classes. Like it uses the full extent of jQuery to build. Like this example here is the comment section for workspaces. And yeah, that gets a lot. Like I think in workspaces alone, I converted a lot of singular methods into at least a handful of lit components. Because for the HTML related or like element related component stuff, we decided to then move the things into lit. As an example, a lot cleaner, this isn't the full component, but this is the method that renders a single comment in lit instead. Like we have this HTML literal, and we can just write cleaner HTML with some inline stuff instead of having to compose a lot of jQuery methods together and deal with all the complexities that come through that. Yeah, but lit also has some problems. One of them is frames and modals. To explain that, I need to explain the structure of the type of free backend in the front-end ways a bit. You can see the kind of structure, but type of free consists of, or the front end consists of two parts here. We have the content frame, which is what module you are in, and then the top frame or the window. And if we want to open a modal, I mean, you've already seen modals in the backend, they cover the entire thing. If they were inside the frame, they would only cover the content frame area, but we of course want them to cover the entire window area. So what the modal implementation does is when we initialize a new modal, it actually goes into the top frame and calls the modal there. That's all good. Like it appears, everything. It's of course the modal is a bit more centered. Generally, just so you can still see what's going on where. If we use lit components and we import it and then say like use the markup inside the modal, then the top frame basically is like that lit component. What is that? And that actually doesn't happen everywhere. This problem occurs in Firefox. Now you could say, Firefox standards lately, they have a lot of problems, but actually, Firefox does a thing right. Actually, like if you think about it, because in Firefox, loaded modules are constrained to the frames they are loaded from. So the lit element that is loaded now content frame, because the JavaScript is obviously loaded in the frame. We call our modal from the frame. So we send that off to the top frame and say, please render this markup. In Firefox, then the modal doesn't know the component. And what we found out is, because when we developed this and most people use some Chromium-based browsers, we just noticed that Blink and WebKit browsers just don't care. They take it regardless from where it is loaded. So yeah, actually Firefox does a thing technically right, at least if you think about it, how you would expect it. But we also have a solution for this. Top-level module import. That's a method that we developed, which we can use in content frames. And then that will basically send an event to the top frame and tell the window to load this module as well. And we can await this and basically ensure this way that whatever other lit element we're using inside a thing or other JavaScript is loaded before we open a modal or whatever. As an example here, we just previously had some import, and now we await a top-level module import of some element. Okay, that's pretty much the main parts of the migration. So there's a lot of different parts as well, but that's the main big things that we went through. So now I want, yeah. Yeah.
You told us a lot about Pavillon implementation like Ajax Regret.
Yeah.
From which version is it on? Is it available? And how is it available? And is it available?
I don't think it is available in the front end. It's mostly backend JavaScript. And you can use it over require.js, and 12 onward, please use modules. Okay, so where are we now? Now, only 15 explicit imports of jQuery are left in the core. Explicit imports is import $ from jQuery. And 2 of them are wizard implementations that are the localization wizard and I think the form wizard and the base class of that. And the rest is entirely in ext form. And that is using a lot of jQuery UI. That is the most complex part that's remaining. But 15 just like that is kind of it's just a number. I mean, for all it could be 20 in before. So of course, I provided some kind of progress bar instead to showcase how the progress has been since 10.4, where the explicit import started, because before we used global jQuery. So in 10.4, we had 135 different files importing jQuery, and now we're back to now down to only 15. That's 11% left. And as we know, the last 20% are the next 80% to work on. The most complex stuff remains. But that's where we are. Really not a lot of stuff is left. So we're aiming to get rid of it by 14, which leaves a deprecation, and then probably by 15, jQuery might be out. So I want to give some acknowledgements, because I am only a core developer since 1.5 years by now. So a lot of people did previous work. A lot of the implementations I have shown have been built by other people. One of them is Andreas Kinas, sitting in the front here, and Benjamin Franzke as well. So a lot of thanks to them. And they also did a lot of work and also helping to solve a lot of the complex problems regarding top-level module imports and all that stuff. So now we're here at the end. Should you do this for your agency project or so? And generally, I would say no, don't. Why? Because it's overly complex. For example, Typo3 is a project that tries to just keep up with modern technologies like import maps lately, our removal of jQuery. In a website project, that would involve hours and hours of work. I can't count the hours that I worked on this to get rid of this. So unless you have an bottomless pit or bottomless pot of money, then you could probably do this. Otherwise, it probably takes a lot of work. jQuery often goes very deep in projects. You also often have the additional thing of plugins that you might be using that adds another layer of complexity. So as said, jQuery is actually still maintained. So if you can also just keep upgrading it, using it, and otherwise just look into replacing the technology with a relaunch and looking at. But in an ongoing project, rather not. You probably save yourself a lot of nerves that we lost on a way to get rid of jQuery. And a little bit of a disclaimer. I showed a lot of Typo3 specific JavaScript today. And you're free to use it in your projects. As I said, over answered already, require.js or module imports by now. But a lot of the JavaScript, or all of the JavaScript in the backend is internal. If you know some of the PHP modules, we have the internal thing. And basically all of the front end in the backend counts as internal. If it's not documented, it's subject to change. But I can also say at least the events and request methods that we have, they probably won't change. So you're safe to use them. But if you dive into backend JavaScript and find some stuff, you have to know that it might possibly change over versions. Okay, that's it. Do you have some questions? Okay, I'll hand you the microphone.
Okay, so you said it's generally not worth it to replace jQuery with vanilla JS for ongoing projects. What made it worth it to do it in the core?
I said it's the like the since it's like a product as well, it's like we just try to stay on top of like modern technologies. Like we're not running like following every new technologies. We're like doing careful selection. Like for example, you also could ask a question: why I'm not using Vue or React for components and are using lit elements? We're using lit elements because they're basically just a tiny wrapper around web components. So if lit would die over the next few years, I don't. It's partly a Google project. You know what Google does with projects. It basically is like we try to stay like some future proofness and basically improving. So it's like and it's like we're not really bound to a specific budget as well. Like I said, it's like you have a budgets of projects, and you probably would burn all kinds of budgets with trying to like a lot of front-end projects. Like if it's like very simple, you have like tiny jQuery stuff, then it's obviously worth it. But as far as I know, a lot of jQuery projects often tend to be like super complex as plugins are involved. So there's that. So it often it also depends on the scale, of course, but with agency webs or like agency projects, they tend to be quite complicated. So that's basically it. So any other questions? Okay, so there are no further questions, then thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the talk. If you have some feedback, here's like my socials and stuff. I will upload the slides to SlideShare and my own website later over the day. So yeah, thank you a lot. Like I also included sources. That's just if you later want to check out the like places from where I took the code that I've showcased in the slides. I actually link all the patches that I took the code from. So